Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on sustainability and profitability. My name is Valérie Martin. I'm Strategic Advisor at Lactanet, and today with me is Steve Adam, our expert in comfort and welfare, as well as Normand Desrochers, co-owner of Ferme Norja on the south shore of St. Lawrence River near Quebec City. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our three main sponsors for Lactanet trainings, Desjardins, des collectifs en formation agricole, as well as Farm Credit Canada. Today's webinar will last about 40 minutes, and we will have a question period at the end of the webinar. So as you have questions during the webinar, you can type them in the chat box in the Zoom program, so we can answer it at the end. And I would like to ask you if it is technically possible for you to put your camera on. We can see you guys here in the studio, so we don't have the impression that we're alone, speaking alone. So if you can turn on your cameras, that'd be good. Hello, everyone. Thank you. For a long time, we've been concerned about profitability and productivity. But in recent years, we've heard about sustainability more, and even if in the agricultural sector. We wondered what the sustainability means at the farm level, but more specifically at the herd level. Steve, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, there's three components. The first one is for sure longevity. And the second one, it's the productivity. We want cows that stay long in the herd, and we want a lot of milk and a lot of production. And also we have the third component, it's the animal health. We want to have good cow, healthy cow, and to don't have any problem in the barn. That's the concept of the global concept of the sustainability for the new index that you will see in some moment.
So, so as I understand, it's a lot more than longevity.
Yeah, it's a lot more because we consider the production and also the health of the animal in the herd.
Thank you, Steve. For you, Mr. Desrochers, I'm curious to know, what does sustainability mean at Norja Farm?
It's the foundation of our herd to have healthy cows that are in the herd for a long time. I want cows that age, but age well. And we want cows with no problems that produce well without forcing them.
Is it a new concept for you?
No, it's something we've always had in mind. We make investments, or when we make investments, the priorities are on comfort and efficiency. It's also important for our daughter, the next generation. We want our company to last over time. We have to think about this.
So even if it's a new word, or it may seem like a new concept, it's something we've always aimed for. In 2016, a committee of experts has been invested in finding criteria among all the data we collect on farms to give us an idea of what the sustainability means in dairy farms, or more specifically at the herd level, as I said earlier. So Steve, being one of these experts, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, we selected 10 indicators to build the new index, and these 10 indicators are grouped in the 4 categories. The first one, as you see on the screen, the first one is longevity and culling, and the second one is the feeding and production, and the third, it's a calf and heifer section, and at the end we have the health section for the sustainability index. If the new report is available now for Quebec and Atlantics, so I can show you to do a demonstration of what is the report. So at your left you have the four criteria. So for the longevity and the culling section, the first one is the percentage of cow in the third lactation. We want a lot of old cows in the herd to be profitable. And the second one is the involuntary cull rate. In this section, it's maybe foot or leg problem, mastitis, any other problem for some cows. And the third one, it's the cow mortality rate. We don't want a lot of cow dead in the farm. So the second section, you can find the MUN, the milk urea nitrogen. We want to select cows where they are at the extreme. Cows under, we select cow under 5 and cow over 18. Under 5, that could be a problem of feed intake, or if it's over 18, maybe a repro problem. We have it for the feeding section. And we have a new one, it's the management index. It's expressed in milk. In summary, these new index, it's the genetic component for each cow. We have the genetic. We adjust it for the fat and protein. So we know what is the potential for each cow in your herd, and we compare it with the real production for the cow. And at the end, for the whole herd, we have the management index. As in this example, you can see we have 562 kilo of milk. It means that the farm is 500 kilos over its own potential in regard of the genetics of each cow. The third one, it's the transition cow index, and some provinces you used to have it, but in the West, maybe that will be available in the year. So that's consider the management around the calving, and we put it in the feeding and production section. The third section, it's the heifer, the calf and heifer. We have calf mortality rate as well. It's at birth or 24 hours after the birth. We have the rate of that, and also we have the age at the first calving in months. That could be the management, the comfort, or the feeding could influence this data, and that's why we put it in the index. And the last section is the health. We have BHB for each cow, and we selected cows over 20.20, and that could be, these cows could be have ketosis, and that's why we put it in the index. And the last one is the somatic cell counts over 200,000, and we have the percentage of cow in the herd who goes over the 200,000 somatic cell counts. In the report, if we move on the middle, you have the last two evaluation. The last two evaluation, these index will be calculated. Three times a year, on April, August, and December. And in this report, you have the last two ones. And if you move on your right, we rank each parameter in the red, yellow, or green zone. And you can see for each parameter where you are, and it's compared with the Canada, all the data we have in our database, and we did it for each item, and at the end, to calculate the sustainability index, we mix it together, we shake it, and we have the new calculation for the sustainability index. You have it on the top, and as you can see, the blue line, it's the last evaluation, and the black square, it's the evaluation before. And you can see this herd is in the green zone. That's a really good herd in this example.
But Steve, in this report, if it was your herd or my herd, whatever, what point would you try to improve to get more sustainability, even if it's really ranked high? Are there any criteria that you'd like to make improve?
Yeah, as you can see in the report, that's a good herd, and for any herd you have good criteria or bad or to improve, and in this case we have the involuntary cull rate that could be improved in this herd. That's easy to see. Something happens in the last month, and for heifers we have the cow mortality rate, and that could be the two criteria that could be improvable on the farm.
Thank you, Steve. Some of you may have already taken note of their index, as it is available in Quebec since January 17th. For the rest of Quebec and Atlantic provinces, for the rest of the Canada, it will be available in 2022. If you want to have your index for the other provinces, if you would like to have your index more rapidly, I ask you to remind it or write it in the survey that we'll send you after the webinar. So someone can contact you and you will be able to have your index. So if it's the case and you have seen your index already, you may be wondering what herd have the highest index, or what the technical parameters they have for these top herds. So we've wondered the same thing too. We've put data in a table so that you can see the average. So we've separated the data in 3 groups. So these are not necessarily the criteria of the index, but technical performances for these herds that are in the average sustainability index, the bottom 10% in sustainability index, and the top 10% in sustainability index. So I'd like to put your attention on, for example, milk production here. As we can see that our top 10% in sustainability index has higher milk production than the average and then the bottom 10%. Even if milk production is not a direct criteria that's calculated in the index, we can see that the top 10% herds have higher milk production. They also have more cows in 3rd lactation or more. We can see that we go from 37 up to 46%. So this is interesting, and this is probably one of the reasons why they produce more milk as well. Another criteria that's interesting to see is that, as well as culled cows or involuntary culling, it's less in the top 10% than in the average or the bottom 10%. When we have less culling or less involuntary culling, it gives you more choices in your cows that you can cull in the herd, or you can sell cows to someone else for production. So it gives you more flexibility in your choices in the culling of cows. Another interesting criteria is the calving interval. So these top 10% herds have lower calving interval and days open than the bottom 10%. So, as you can imagine, I didn't choose Mr. Desrochers at random to come and be with us today. I chose him because he has one of the highest rank in Canada. But before we continue, let's watch a video presentation about Norja Farm.
La ferme Norja existe depuis 1988. Au départ, c'était la ferme de mon père. Moi, j'ai intégré la compagnie en 88, ferme Norja. 2001, j'ai racheté les parts de mon père avec ma conjointe Martine. 2017, on a entrepris le chantier de construire l'étable neuve pour aller vers la robotique, étant donné qu'on avait un troupeau qui était assez performant, mais en 2 traites attachées, on trouvait qu'on pouvait faire mieux. Fait qu'on a entrepris le chantier. En 2018, on a commencé la traite robotique. On est à notre 4e année aujourd'hui. À la ferme ici, on a présentement 105 vaches à la traite par 2 robots. Moyenne de traite à 2,6 passages par jour présentement. On a 205 têtes en tout avec le relais. On a notre fille qui est actionnaire depuis quelques mois avec nous, qui est notre relève. Sinon, on a un employé à temps plein, puis un employé occasionnel, plus mon père qui nous aide pour les travaux dans les champs, etc. Nos valeurs ici à la ferme Norja, c'est surtout le bien-être et le confort des animaux. C'est aller chercher le maximum de nos vaches sans les forcer. C'est pour ça qu'on est allé vers la traite robotisée, ça le dit, traite volontaire. Puis sinon, c'est d'avoir du plaisir dans ce qu'on fait, autant pour nous que pour ceux qui viennent travailler avec nous. Ce qui me rendrait plus fier de mon entreprise, c'est sûr que c'est la continuité. Ça passe par notre fille avec la relève, c'est sûr.
So, Mr. Desrochers, I guess that to have some a good rank in sustainability as you have, you may have put some practices at the farm or special practices. Can you tell us more about your management practices?
Yes.
It starts with the replacements. It's the base of our herd. It's Catherine who looks after the young cattle to see that the calves are in good health, eat well, that they develop as they should. We've invested a lot in replacement, starting with the choice of bulls with high pro-dollar index, focus on the durability to have cows that are functional. We want our calves to be raised in a freestall environment by age group so that they get better feed and that they develop competition among themselves. And then that gives us the chance to get some heifers that when they calve out will be able to compete with the milking cows. Feeding is very important. We want them to consume lots of feed. That's why our heifers have stainless steel feed bunks that helps with feed consumption. Also keeps the feed cooler in the summer. We had observed that a part of our heifers did not have stainless steel feed bunks, that it was on concrete, and we saw that those heifers were not eating as much feed. There was more feed left over at the end of the day.
It's interesting to see how you put emphasis on learning good eating behaviors at a young age. By making this, you make sure your heifers learn how to compete and eat well. So you put all the chances on your side that your cows will learn how to compete at the feed bunk and take their place. It's very interesting. When it comes to breeding heifers, do you have a particular protocol in place or certain practices you do?
The first breeding is at 13 months. and then most of them are with sex semen for the first ones, and then if not, regular semen. If after 5 breedings they're not pregnant, then they will be culled, because we feel that cows that are difficult to get pregnant, that problem will continue as they get older. Many of our first and second lactations have been bred with using sex semen. 60% of our cows are bred with beef bulls. We make we raise our heifers with the offspring of sex semen.
Thank you, Mr. Desrochers. Before we continue, I just would like to remind you that the interpretation is available. You've probably seen this in the chat. There is a message that was in the chat, so if you want, you have interpretation for the Mr. Desrochers' part. It's interesting to see how you have a protocol in place and you really respect it. Once in lactation, how do you ensure your cows will stay for a long time?
When we built the new barn, we were thinking about, or we're hoping to have an older herd. We already had an older herd. What we did is that in the current barn, the bunks are 52 inches, 56 inches for the mature cows, a little more than normal, so they perform better. As I said earlier, we want our cows to produce a lot, and we want them to be comfortable. We do a lot of observation, and we've noticed that there was an obstacle between the water bowls. When they were drinking, there was some competition, given that they did not have free access. So we moved the gates, which allowed the cows to circulate around the water bowls. It's easier for them to drink. Also had some pens, isolation pens at the front when we have cows with a problem, especially mobility problems, and we bring them in these pens on bedding, and we can milk them with a portable milker. So it has allowed us to save a few cows that we would have otherwise culled.
Would you recommend this to someone who has a construction project?
Yes, certainly.
This reminds me of one of the criteria we talked in the sustainability index, which is involuntary culling. We would all like to have very little involuntary culling, but we sometimes have the impression that we have no control on this criteria. In terms of research, Steve, are there any avenues that could help us, or do you know how or why the cows are culled, or any data to show us?
Yeah, what the research says, we can have the breeding rate can have an impact on the culling rate too. And also, if we look at our data, we can see the 3 calls of the involuntary culling. The first 3. We have the reproduction, somatic cell counts, and feet and leg problem. And if we look or match it with the cause of death in the barn, our 3 first causes, it's injury or accident, disease, and also feet and leg problem. So when we look at our data, we can see feet and leg problem that could be a good thing to look at the farm to improve the involuntary culling rate.
Thank you, Steve. In terms of prevention of lameness, I think we may have some leads. Mr. Desrochers, in the video, we saw your wife preparing the footbath. You probably have a certain protocol in this too. How do you manage to reduce culling for foot and leg problems?
Whether we're freestall or tie stall, certainly cows do not need to have good cows and feed because it affects them in production, consumption, and feed consumption and reproduction. We have 3 foot baths per week. Also, hoof trimming 3 times a year by a professional. And in between those visits, we touch it up ourselves. I do that myself. We note all these interventions for lameness in our management software, and we keep a record of all of that. So when the hoof trimmer comes back to the farm, we know what the cow has had as far as hoof trimming. We also do the hoof trimming of all heifers that will calve in the next 4 months to ensure that all the cows have at least 1 hoof trimming before the first calving. Before that, our dry cows were kept with the heifers, but we noticed that the dry cows were bringing some disease to the heifers, so we have a special pen just for dry cows on straw bedding, so they no longer have contact with the heifers.
I understand that prevention and good healthy legs is the key to produce milk for a long time. In terms of longevity, or speaking of longevity, what is your goal in this term in your herd?
50%.
50% cows in third lactation
and third lactation or more. Yes, quite interesting.
It seems, is it a lot more adjustment to your practices to have more mature cows in the herd?
No, not really. In the tie stall, we had a good performing herd, but especially should pay attention to the calving. At the day of calving in the first 2 weeks, they all calve in a bedded pen. Each cow receives a calcium bolus at calving, and a second if necessary. Our cows, we keep them 2 weeks in the isolation pen or the infirmary. We have better contact with them. Those cows receive 2/3 of the ration of the cows in milk from the TMR plus dry hay at will. So they seem to pick up production more quickly. Given that it's a robot, we can personalize the feed. So at the robot, we give them feed with glycol.
So putting time and details around transition periods seems to be a good way to have milk for the rest of the lactation and more milk. In terms of profitability, is having a high index or sustainability index pays off? Do you have something to show us about this, Steve?
Yeah, what we did, we compare the data that you showed before, and if you look at the slide, we have the bottom 10, the average, and the top 10. We used all these technical data, and we calculate the margin of the for the enterprise, and we calculate it for the bottom 10, the average, and for the top 10. In these calculations, we use a herd size of 100 kilos of fat. And if we compare the bottom 10 with the average, the margin of operation is $61,000. And the average versus the top 10, we have $38,000 between these two groups. And if we compare the top 10 versus the bottom 10, you can see we have around $94,000 between this group of farms if we use their technical data to show the margin of operation.
What makes this difference, Steve?
Yeah. the difference between these two groups, usually it's the milk production and also the culling rate. That's the big difference between, and we have to raise more heifers for the bottom 10 than the top 10.
Okay. It's very interesting, but I'm sure some of you wonder, and what if we produce more milk? Would it be as profitable if I produce more milk, even if I have a little bit more culling rate? Because as we know, cows that produce lots of milk pay back their rearing costs more rapidly. Have you compared these numbers?
Yes, we try to compare on the slide. We compare the top 10 of sustainability index and the milk value, the best one, the top 10 too. And if you show the slide on the screen, you will see the difference between the two groups. We have on your left the sustainability index and then herd with the milk value on your right. And we have some difference between these two groups. The milk, we have a little bit less milk for the sustainability index versus the group where we have the best milk value. It's around 1,000 kilos. And also you can see the difference between these two groups. We have the involuntary culling rate. We have more cows culled in the milk value group. So we did the same calculation to calculate the margin of operation. As you can see, we don't have a lot of difference between these two groups. A little bit more for sustainability index, but it's around the same. So it's not the same herds, and you can see the difference between these two groups. To have 100 kilos of quota, you need to have 83 cows per herd with the sustainability index versus the milk value group. We need around 78 cows. And the difference between for the labor, it's a little bit more for sustainability index, but it's near very close together. And the big difference is the replacement cost. We have $10,000 less cost for the sustainability index versus the milk value group. So that's what explained the difference between these two groups.
Thank you, Steve. I think the data is pretty clear. Improving sustainability index pays off. Mr. Desrochers, you have seen your index in preparation for coming here. What was your first impression on this report or this new information we have?
I found it interesting to combine several criteria over which we have certain control. I've already identified a couple of points on which things we could improve. For example, talking about comfort, but to improve the comfort of our cows, we should spend some time in the infirmary after calving. We want to add a brush. It's just a little detail, but we've noticed that when they leave the infirmary to go in the milking group, they're really seeking the brush.
Okay, thank you. We can see that you and your team put a lot of time on observing your cows, and it's interesting to see how you have adapted your barn for your cows and not the opposite. So it's very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Desrochers. In conclusion, I invite producers to go see their index, producers from Quebec and Atlantic Canada. For the other provinces, as I said, it will be available later this year. But if you want to have your index after the webinar, you can answer the survey that we'll send you on email after the webinar. If you are curious to see what you can do to improve your sustainability index, we'll be giving workshops in February and March. You can register on our website. And during these workshops, we will be looking at the results of a questionnaire that we had on over 2,000 farms in Quebec and New Brunswick. This survey was on in 2020, and we were asking questions about management practices to producers. So we are going to show you what management practices these top 10 herds and sustainability index do. We will also give you practices to avoid, of course, innovative practices, and talk about around these good practices to improve your index. So as I said, you can register on our website if you are interested. I would like to thank Steve Adam for today's webinar, as well as Mr. Desrochers, and our three sponsors, Desjardins, Collectif en Formation Agricole, et Farm Credits Canada. Now, we have some questions in the chat. So I remind you that if you want to ask questions, you have to type them in the chat, and we'll try to answer it before we finish. So I see a question here. Maybe Steve, you can answer. If I don't have data on one of the criteria in the sustainability index, will I still get a report generated?
Yeah, every herd will have a report. So to calculate an index, we need a minimum of 7 criteria. And if you don't have it, you have a blank in your report, but you will have the data on your report for the rest of the data we have. And any herd can have a report, but for the calculation of the sustainability index, we need to have a minimum of 7 good data in the report.
Thank you. Another question here. You talked about lameness and the importance of keeping track of feet and legs problem. Do you have any suggestions on how to monitor this easily?
That's a good question. To monitor it, yes, it's easy because we have now a new app to observe the lameness on the farm. And you can register your observation on a regular basis, maybe monthly to monthly, every 2 months. But you need to be trained to assess it on the farm. But I think it's the first thing we need to have to improve the feet and leg problem or the lameness problem. We need to have the data to apply the good solution to improve these problems.
So identifying the real problem is the key.
And which cow and yeah.
Thank you, Steve. I see another question here, Mr. Desrochers. You said you do 60% insemination with a bull semen, beef bull semen. Sorry. What about the other 40%? Do you do sexed semen or conventional semen?
Oui. Yes, the 40%, as I said, 60% of our cows are bred to beef bulls. But we are part of the Optimate program with the CMEX. And in Optimate, they identify the 40 best cows in the herd. And from that 40%, 10%, the best 10% of those 40 are bred with sexed semen. And the other 30% are either genomic or proven bulls, always keeping into mind to have a high pro-dollar index.
Okay, thank you. Another question here for Mr. Desrochers. Other than milking, do you have something else that is automated in your farm to make your work easily?
En français.
Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres choses d'automatisées dans la ferme autre que la traite?
Yes, the feeding is automated. We have TMR, 4 feedings per day, 4 different receipts per day fed by a feeding robot that is 3 servings per recipe or per ration. So there's 15 feedings per day over the 24 hours. We have feeding at night, which also encourages the cattle to move around.
It facilitates your work and makes your team sustainable too. I guess. Well, this is all the time we had for questions. Thank you very much for attending the webinar today. We will send you a survey, as I said earlier. So if feel free to ask other questions. If you can write to Lactanet to have answers to your questions, and if you want to have your sustainability index, you can write it in the survey. Thank you for attending this webinar.